The old brick building on Cedar Street had been standing for over 60 years, paint peeled from its walls. The windows were foggy and cracked in places. A faded sign near the entrance read "Home for Children." Most people in the city drove past it without a second glance. To them, it was just another forgotten building in a forgotten part of town. But for 12-year-old Maya, this building was the only home she had ever known. She arrived here when she was just 3 years old. A social worker had carried her through those heavy doors on a rainy October night, wrapped in a thin blanket that smelled like hospital soap. Maya had no memory of that night, of course. She only knew the story because Mrs., the orphanage director, had told her once when she asked about her past. Her mother had died shortly after giving birth. There was no father listed on any documents, no grandparents, no aunts or uncles. No one came looking for her. No one ever called. It was as if Maya had simply appeared in this world with no roots, no history, no family tree to call her own. Growing up in the orphanage was not cruel, but it was lonely. The caretakers were kind enough. They made sure the children had food, clothes, and a bed to sleep in. But there were always too many kids and not enough adults, too many needs and not enough time. Maya learned early that if she wanted attention, she would have to fight for it, and fighting was not in her nature. She was a quiet girl, the kind of child who sat in corners and watched the world rather than jumping into it. While other kids ran through the hallways screaming and playing, Maya preferred to sit by the window with a book or stare at the clouds moving slowly across the sky. The caretakers often forgot she was even in the room. Every few months, couples would visit the orphanage looking to adopt. Maya remembered those days clearly. The children would be dressed in their cleanest clothes. The caretakers would tell everyone to smile and be polite. And then the visitors would walk through, looking at the kids like they were choosing fruit at a market. Maya watched couple after couple pick the younger children. The bobbies went first, then the toddlers. The bubbly, outgoing kids who ran up to strangers and hugged their legs always caught attention. But Maya would sit quietly in her chair, hoping someone would notice her, hoping someone would see something special in her silence. No one ever did. By the time she turned 10, Maya had stopped hopping. She told herself it did not matter. She told herself she was fine on her own. But late at night, when the dormitory was dark and everyone else was asleep, she would pull her blanket over her head and cry without making a sound. The only thing Maya had from her mother was a single photograph and a small music box that no longer worked. The photograph showed a young woman with dark hair and gentle eyes, holding a newborn baby wrapped in a white blanket. On the back of the photo, someone had written a message in blue ink. The handwriting was soft and curvy. It said, "Music will always find you home." Maya did not understand what those words meant, but she kept the photograph under her pillow every single night. Sometimes she would hold it against her chest and pretend her mother was still out there somewhere, looking for her, trying to find her way back. The music box was broken. It had been broken for as long as Maya could remember. But when she held it up to her ear and turned the little handle, she could still hear a faint, broken melody trying to escape. Just a few notes. Enough to make her heart ache for something she could not name. When Maya was 7 years old, she discovered the piano. It sat in the corner of the recreation room, covered in dust and ignored by everyone. The orphanage had received it as a donation years ago, but none of the caretakers knew how to play, and none of the children seemed interested. A few keys were chipped. The wood was scratched and faded. But to Maya, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. One afternoon, while the other kids were outside playing, Maya walked up to the piano and pressed a single key. The sound that came out was soft and warm. It filled the empty room and wrapped around her like a hug. She pressed another key, and another. Before she knew it, she was sitting on the bench, running her fingers across the keyboard, lost in a world that finally made sense. From that day on, the piano became her best friend. She could not afford lessons. There was no teacher to guide her, But Maya was determined. She found old music books in the orphanage library, pages yellowed and torn. She spent hours staring at the notes, trying to understand what they meant. She watched videos on the single shared computer in the common room, pausing and rewinding until her eyes hurt. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, Maya would sneak downstairs to the recreation room. She would sit at the piano in the darkness, playing as softly as she could so no one would hear. Those nights became her secret, her escape, the only time she felt truly free. Music came to her naturally. It was like the notes were already living inside her, waiting to be released. She did not just play songs, she felt them. Every melody carried an emotion. Every chord told a story. When she was sad, the piano cried with her. When she was angry, it thundered beneath her fingers. And when she dreamed of the mother she never knew, the music became soft and searching, like a letter written to someone who could never write back. By the time Maya turned 12, she had taught herself to play better than most trained musicians twice her age. But no one knew. She never performed for anyone. She never told the caretakers about her late-night practice sessions. The piano was her secret, and she wanted to keep it that way. That is, until Mrs. found out. One night, Maya was so lost in her music that she did not hear the footsteps behind her. She was playing a piece she had composed herself, a haunting melody about loneliness and hope. When she finally opened her eyes, Mrs. was standing in the doorway with tears streaming down her face. Maya froze. She expected to be scolded for being out of bed. She expected to be punished. But Mrs. just walked over, sat down beside her on the bench, and whispered, "How long have you been able to do this?" Maya could not answer. Her throat was too tight. Mrs. put a hand on her shoulder. "That was the most beautiful thing I have ever heard." In that moment, something shifted inside Maya. For the first time in her life, someone had seen her, really seen her, not the quiet girl in the corner, not the orphan no one wanted, but her, the real her. 3 weeks later, Mrs. called Maya into her office and told her about a competition. It was called Rising Stars, and it was the biggest talent show in the city. Thousands of kids auditioned every year. Wealthy families sent their children with private coaches and expensive instruments. The winner received a scholarship, a recording contract, and the chance to perform in front of some of the most powerful people in the country. One of the judges was a man named Robert. He was a billionaire, a tech genius, and one of the harshest critics in the industry. He had made contestants cry with his brutal honesty. He had walked out of performances he found boring. He never smiled. He never clapped. And he had never, in 15 years of judging, given a perfect score. Mrs. handed Maya the application form. "I already signed you up," she said with a small smile. "You deserve to be seen by the world." Maya looked down at the paper in her hands. Her fingers trembled. For a girl who had spent her whole life being invisible, the thought of standing on a stage in front of thousands of people was terrifying. But somewhere deep inside, beneath all the fear and doubt, a tiny spark of hope flickered to life. Maybe this was what her mother meant. Maybe music really would find her home. The morning of the competition arrived faster than Maya expected. She woke up before sunrise, her stomach twisted into knots. For a long moment, she just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. Outside, the sky was still dark. The other girls in the dormitory were sound asleep. Maya could hear their soft breathing, the occasional rustle of blankets. Everything was peaceful, everything was normal, but inside her chest, a storm was raging. She reached under her pillow and pulled out the photograph of her mother. In the dim light, she could barely see the woman's face, but she knew every detail by heart. The curve of her smile, the warmth in her eyes, the way she held baby Maya so close, like she never wanted to let go. "Music will always find you home." Maya whispered the words to herself. She had read them 1,000 times, but today they felt different, heavier, like they carried a meaning she was only beginning to understand. She got out of bed quietly and walked to the small closet where her clothes were kept. The orphanage did not have much money for nice things. Most of the clothes were donated, passed down from child to child until they were worn thin. Maya owned exactly 3 dresses. One was too small. One had a large stain on the front that would not come out no matter how many times she washed it. The third was pale blue with tiny white flowers along the hem. It was the nicest thing she owned. But when she pulled it out, her heart sank. There was a tear along the side seam. It must have happened last week when she caught it on the edge of a chair. She had not noticed until now. Maya held the dress up to the light and felt tears sting her eyes. She had nothing else to wear, nothing good enough for a stage, nothing good enough for judges and cameras and crowds. For a moment, she thought about not going. It would be so easy to climb back into bed and pretend this day never existed. No one would blame her. No one would even be surprised. Girls like her did not belong in competitions like this. Girls like her stayed in the background where no one could see them. But then she heard Mrs. voice in her head. You deserve to be seen by the world. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She found a needle and thread in the supply closet and spent the next hour carefully stitching the tear closed. The repair was not perfect. If you looked closely, you could still see where the fabric had been mended, but it would have to do. By the time the sun came up, Maya was dressed and ready. Mrs. met her at the front door with a warm smile and a brown paper bag containing a sandwich and an apple for the road. The competition venue was on the other side of the city. They would have to take 2 buses to get there. The journey felt like it lasted forever. Maya sat by the window, watching the neighborhoods change as they traveled farther from the orphanage. The buildings grew taller. The streets grew cleaner. The cars parked along the curbs became shinier and more expensive. By the time they reached the competition hall, Maya felt like she had entered a completely different world. The venue was enormous. It was a grand concert hall with marble floors and crystal chandeliers hanging from ceilings so high they seemed to touch the sky. Hundreds of people filled the lobby. Parents in designer suits, children in custom-made outfits. Everyone looked polished and confident, like they belonged on magazine covers. Maya looked down at her mended dress and felt her cheeks burn with shame. Mrs. squeezed her hand. Do not compare yourself to them, she said softly. You have something they do not. Maya wanted to believe her, but as they made their way to the registration desk, she could feel eyes on her, judging her, dismissing her. A woman in a fur coat glanced at Maya's shoes and whispered something to her husband. A group of teenagers near the entrance laughed at something, and Maya was sure they were laughing at her. She kept her head down and followed Mrs. through the crowd. The backstage area was even more overwhelming. Dozens of young performers were warming up, practicing scales, running through their pieces one last time. Some had private coaches giving them last-minute advice. Others had parents adjusting their hair, straightening their collars, telling them how proud they were. Maya had no one but Mrs., who had to leave soon to find a seat in the audience. And once she was gone, Maya would be completely alone. She found a quiet corner and sat down on a wooden bench. Her hands were trembling. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. She pulled out her mother's photograph and held it tight, trying to draw strength from those faded eyes. A shadow fell over her. Maya looked up and saw a boy standing in front of her. He was about her age, maybe a little older. He wore an expensive black suit with shiny silver buttons. His hair was slicked back perfectly. His shoes looked like they cost more than everything Maya owned combined. Behind him stood a woman who was clearly his mother. She had the same sharp features, the same cold eyes. She looked at Maya like she was something unpleasant stuck to the bottom of her shoe. The boy smirked. They let anyone in here now, he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. I did not know this was a charity event. A few kids nearby snickered. Maya felt her face go hot. She wanted to say something back. She wanted to defend herself, but no words came out. Her throat was too tight. Her eyes were too wet. The boy's mother put a hand on his shoulder. Come along, dear. Do not waste your time." They walked away, still laughing. Maya sat frozen on the bench, her mother's photograph clutched so tightly her knuckles turned white. For a long, terrible moment she thought about leaving. She could slip out the back door and disappear. No one would notice. No one would care. She was just the orphan girl in the mended dress. She did not belong here. She had been foolish to ever think she did. But then something strange happened. A memory floated up from somewhere deep inside her. She was 7 years old, sitting at the dusty piano in the orphanage recreation room. She remembered pressing that first key and hearing the sound fill the empty room. She remembered how it felt, like coming home, like being found. Music had saved her then. Maybe it could save her now. Maya took a deep breath. She looked down at her mother's photograph one more time. The woman in the picture seemed to be smiling at her, encouraging her, telling her not to give up. "I will try," Maya whispered, "for you." She tucked the photograph back into her pocket and waited. The hours crawled by. One by one, the other contestants were called to the stage. Maya could hear muffled applause through the walls. She could hear fragments of music, some beautiful, some not so much. Each time a performer returned backstage, they were surrounded by family and coaches, showered with praise and hugs. Maya sat alone on her bench, waiting, watching, trying to keep her breathing steady. Finally, a stagehand with a clipboard appeared at the door. "Number 47, he called out, "you are next." Maya's legs felt like they were made of water. She stood up slowly, her knees shaking. The walk from the backstage area to the wings of the stage felt like the longest walk of her life. Each step was heavy. Each breath was shallow. And then she saw it. The stage was enormous, bigger than anything she had ever imagined. Bright lights hung from the ceiling, so powerful they made her squint. Rows and rows of seats stretched out into the darkness, filled with thousands of faces she could not see. And in the center of the stage, gleaming under the spotlights, sat a grand piano. It was beautiful, black and polished and perfect, nothing like the broken upright at the orphanage. Maya's heart stopped. At the judges' table sat 3 people. 2 of them were looking at their notes, barely paying attention. But the third one made Maya's blood run cold. Robert. He sat in the center chair, his arms crossed, his expression bored. He was older than she expected, with silver hair and deep lines around his mouth. He looked tired, impatient, like he had already seen 100 performances today and none of them had impressed him. He glanced at Maya as she walked onto the stage. His eyes moved over her mended dress, her worn shoes, her trembling hands. Then he looked away, like she was not worth his attention. "Whenever you are ready," he said flatly, checking his watch. Maya walked to the piano on legs that barely worked. She sat down on the bench and placed her fingers on the keys. They were smooth and cool beneath her touch, so different from the chipped keys she was used to. The audience was silent. The lights were blinding. The whole world seemed to be holding its breath. Maya closed her eyes. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she heard her mother's voice. "Music will always find you home." She began to play. The first note was barely a whisper. It floated out into the vast concert hall like a single drop of rain falling into a still pond. Soft, fragile, almost too quiet to hear. A few people in the audience shifted in their seats. Someone coughed near the back. One of the judges shuffled some papers on the table. Maya kept her eyes closed. She did not want to see the bored faces. She did not want to see Robert checking his watch again. She just wanted to disappear into the music the way she always did late at night in the orphanage recreation room. She played the opening bars of the piece she had composed herself. She called it Letters to Someone. It was not a song she had ever written down. It lived only in her heart, in her memory, in the space between her fingers and the keys. Every note was a question she had asked 1,000 times. Who was my mother? Why did she leave me? Did she love me? Would she be proud of who I am? The melody started simple. just a few notes repeating in a gentle pattern. It sounded almost like a lullaby, the kind a mother might hum to her child before sleep. There was nothing flashy about it, nothing that would impress judges looking for technical skill or complicated arrangements. In the audience, a woman leaned over to her husband and whispered, "Is this it? I expected more." A teenager in the third row pulled out his phone and started scrolling, already bored. But Maya did not hear any of this. She was somewhere else now, somewhere far away from the bright lights and the crowded seats. She was back in the orphanage, sitting alone by the window on a rainy afternoon. She was holding her mother's photograph, tracing the outline of a face she would never touch. She was winding the broken music box, straining to hear those few faint notes that always made her cry. And then something changed. The melody began to shift. The simple lullaby grew darker, deeper. Maya's left hand joined in, adding low notes that rumbled like distant thunder. The music swelled and expanded, filling the concert hall with sound that seemed too big to come from one small girl. The woman who had whispered stopped talking. The teenager put down his phone. One by one, every person in the audience went still. Maya played the second movement of her piece. This was the part she had never played for anyone, not even Mrs. It was too personal, too raw. It was the sound of every lonely night she had ever spent, every tear she had cried into her pillow, every time she had watched another child leave the orphanage with a new family while she stayed behind. The notes came faster now. Her fingers danced across the keys with a speed and precision that seemed impossible for someone who had never taken a single lesson. But Maya was not thinking about technique. She was not thinking about impressing anyone. She was simply letting out everything she had kept locked inside for 12 years. The music told her story without words. It spoke of empty hallways and unanswered prayers. It spoke of pressing her face against cold windows, watching happy families walk by on the street below. It spoke of the ache that never went away, the hole in her heart that nothing could fill. Somewhere in the middle rows, a woman began to cry. She did not know why. She did not know this girl or her story, but something in the music reached inside her and touched a wound she thought had healed long ago. She was not the only one. All across the concert hall, people were wiping their eyes. Strangers who had come expecting entertainment found themselves overwhelmed by emotions they could not explain. The music was doing something to them. It was breaking down walls they had built around their hearts. It was reminding them of their own losses, their own loneliness, their own unanswered questions. At the judge's table, Robert sat frozen. His phone lay forgotten on the table. His notes were untouched. His arms, which had been crossed with impatience, now hung loose at his sides. His face, usually so hard and unreadable, had gone pale. He was staring at the small girl on the stage like he was seeing a ghost. The second movement contained a melody that Robert had not heard in almost 20 years. It was not a famous tune. It was not something Maya could have learned from a book or a video. It was a melody that had been composed by one person and one person only: his younger sister. Robert's hands began to shake. His breath caught in his throat. Memories flooded back, memories he had spent years trying to bury. He saw his sister sitting at the piano in their childhood home, her dark hair falling over her shoulders as she played. He heard her laugh. He heard her voice. He remembered the last time he saw her, the argument that drove her away, the words he could never take back. The melody Maya was playing was the same melody his sister used to play for him when he was scared or sad. She had composed it herself when they were children. She called it her heart song. She said it was the truest part of who she was, translated into music. Robert had not heard that melody since the day his sister walked out of his life forever. Until now. On the stage, Maya moved into the final movement of her piece. The storm of emotions began to settle. The dark, heavy notes gave way to something lighter, something hopeful. The melody rose like the sun breaking through clouds after a long night of rain. This part of the song was about the dreams Maya still held onto despite everything. Dreams of being found, dreams of belonging somewhere, dreams of a mother's love that she had never known but somehow still believed in. The final notes rang out across the concert hall. They hung in the air for a long moment, shimmering like stars. And then there was silence. Complete, absolute silence. No one moved. No one breathed. The entire audience sat stunned, unsure of what they had just witnessed. Maya opened her eyes slowly. The bright lights made her squint. For a second she forgot where she was. Then reality came rushing back. The stage, the judges, the thousands of people watching her. Her heart began to pound again. Had she done something wrong? Why was everyone so quiet? She looked out at the audience, searching for Mrs. Face, but she could not find her in the sea of shadowy figures. Then she heard something unexpected. Crying. Not soft, polite sniffling, real crying. The kind that comes from deep in the chest, the kind that cannot be controlled or hidden. It was coming from the judge's table. Maya turned her head and saw Robert, the man who never smiled, the man who had made countless performers cry with his harsh words, the man who had not given a perfect score in 15 years of judging. He was weeping. Tears streamed down his face. His shoulders shook. He made no effort to hide it or wipe his eyes. He just sat there, broken open by the music of a 12-year-old orphan girl. The other judges stared at him in shock. The audience began to murmur. Cameras flashed. Something extraordinary was happening and everyone knew it. Robert pushed back his chair. The legs scraped loudly against the floor. He stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. And then he did something no one expected. He began to walk toward the stage. Whispers rippled through the crowd. This was against all the rules. Judges were supposed to stay at their table. They were supposed to wait until all performances were finished before making comments. But Robert did not seem to care about rules anymore. He walked like a man in a dream. His steps were unsteady. His face was wet with tears. He stopped at the edge of the stage and looked up at Maya with an expression she did not understand. It was not the look of a judge evaluating a performance. It was the look of a man who had just seen something impossible. "Where did you learn that song?" His voice cracked on the last word. Maya blinked, confused and frightened. "I wrote it," she said softly. "I wrote it myself." Robert shook his head slowly. "No, the second part, that melody in the middle, where did you hear it?" Maya did not know what to say. Her hand moved instinctively to her pocket, where her mother's photograph was tucked safely away. She thought about the broken music box on her nightstand, the one that played only a few faint notes, the same notes she had woven into her song. "My mother," she whispered. "She left me a music box. That was the melody it played." Robert's face went white. And the world, as Maya knew, it was about to change forever. The concert hall had gone completely still. Thousands of people sat in their seats, barely breathing, watching something unfold that none of them could understand. Cameras continued to flash, but even the photographers had lowered their equipment, too stunned to keep shooting. Robert stood at the edge of the stage, his face pale and streaked with tears. His hands were trembling at his sides. He looked nothing like the cold, intimidating judge everyone feared. He looked like a man whose world had just been turned upside down. Maya sat frozen at the piano bench. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She did not understand what was happening. She did not know why this powerful man was staring at her like she held the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. "A music box," Robert repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your mother left you a music box." Maya nodded slowly. "It does not work anymore. It is broken, but I can still hear a little bit of the melody if I hold it close to my ear." Robert closed his eyes. A sound escaped his lips that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. When he opened his eyes again, They were filled with something Maya had never seen directed at her before: hope. "Do you have anything else?" he asked. "Anything else from your mother?" Maya hesitated. The photograph was her most precious possession. She had never shown it to anyone except Mrs. It felt too private, too sacred to share with strangers, but something in this man's voice made her reach into her pocket. She pulled out the worn photograph and held it up. Robert's reaction was immediate. He stumbled backward like he had been struck. His hand flew to his mouth. A cry escaped from somewhere deep in his chest. For a moment, it looked like his legs might give out beneath him. He gasped, "Oh my God!" The name meant nothing to Maya. She looked down at the photograph in her hand, then back at the shattered man standing before her. "You knew my mother?" she asked, her voice small and uncertain. Robert could not answer. He was sobbing now, openly and without shame. Tears poured down his face. His shoulders heaved. 15 years of grief and guilt came flooding out in front of thousands of witnesses, and he did not care. He climbed onto the stage. No one tried to stop him. The other judges sat motionless at their table, too shocked to intervene. The audience watched in stunned silence as the billionaire crossed the distance between himself and the orphan girl. He stopped directly in front of Maya and sank to his knees. "She was my sister," he said through his tears. "Was my baby sister." The words hit Maya like a wave. She felt dizzy. The concert hall seemed to spin around her. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. "Your sister," she repeated. The word felt strange on her tongue, foreign, impossible. Robert nodded. He reached out with a trembling hand, wanting to touch her but afraid to, like she might disappear if he got too close. "I have been looking for her for almost 20 years, he said. "I hired investigators. I spent millions. I searched everywhere, but I could never find her. I thought she had just vanished. I thought maybe she did not want to be found." He paused, struggling to get the next words out. "I never knew she had a daughter. I never knew she had you." Maya felt tears burning in her own eyes now. All her life, she had believed she was alone in the world. No family, no history, no one who shared her blood. And now this stranger was kneeling in front of her, telling her that everything she believed was wrong. "What happened?" she asked. "Why did she leave?" Robert's face crumpled with pain. The guilt that had haunted him for 2 decades was written in every line, every shadow. "We had a fight," he said quietly. "A terrible fight. Our family was wealthy, powerful. Our father had expectations for us. He wanted to marry someone from our world, someone with money and status. But she fell in love with a musician, a kind, gentle man who had nothing but his talent and his heart." He paused, the memories clearly causing him physical pain. "Our father was furious. He said she was throwing away her future. He threatened to cut her off completely if she married him, and Robert's voice broke. "I took our father's side. I told her she was being foolish. I told her she was choosing a nobody over her own family." Maya listened in silence. She was crying now too, tears sliding down her cheeks and falling onto the piano keys. "She left that night," Robert continued. "She packed a small bag and walked out the door. The last thing she said to me was that I would regret my words one day. She was right. I have regretted them every single day since." He looked at Maya with eyes full of sorrow and desperate hope. "I tried to find her years later after our father passed away. I wanted to apologize. I wanted to tell her I was wrong, but it was too late. She had disappeared completely. No trace, no records, nothing." Maya thought about the photograph in her hand. The young woman with dark hair and gentle eyes, holding a newborn baby like she was the most precious thing in the world. "She died," Maya said softly. "After I was born, that is what they told me at the orphanage." Robert let out a sound that was pure anguish. His worst fear confirmed. The sister he had driven away, the sister he had never stopped loving, had died alone somewhere, without family, without him. "And your father?" he asked. Maya shook her head. "I do not know. There was no name on any of the documents. No one ever came for me. Robert understood then. Must have lost her husband somehow. Maybe he died too. Maybe he left. Whatever happened, she had ended up alone and pregnant, with no money and no family to turn to. Too proud or too hurt to reach out to the brother who had rejected her. And when she died giving birth, her daughter had been left with nothing but a photograph and a broken music box. The weight of it was almost too much to bear. "I am so sorry," Robert whispered. "I am so sorry for everything. If I had just listened to her, if I had just supported her instead of pushing her away, none of this would have happened. You would have had a family, you would have had a home." Maya did not know what to say. A part of her wanted to be angry at this man. He had caused her mother so much pain. His cruelty had led to a chain of events that left Maya growing up alone in an orphanage. But when she looked at his face, she did not see cruelty. She saw regret. She saw a man who had made a terrible mistake when he was young and had spent the rest of his life paying for it. She saw someone who was just as broken as she was. Slowly, carefully, Maya reached out and placed her small hand on top of his. The touch seemed to shatter something inside Robert. He broke down completely, weeping like a child. Years of searching, years of hopping, years of fearing the worst, all released in a single moment. "You have her eyes," he said through his tears. "You have her gift. I heard it in your music. That song you played, the melody from the music box, wrote that when she was only 16. She called it her heart song. She said it was the truest part of who she was." Maya thought about all the nights she had spent playing that melody on the old piano at the orphanage. She had always felt connected to it in a way she could not explain. Now she understood why. It was not just a random tune. It was her mother's heart, passed down through a broken music box to a daughter she would never meet. The audience had been silent through all of this, but now a murmur began to spread through the hall. People were crying. People were hugging strangers next to them. People were recording everything on their phones, knowing they were witnessing something extraordinary. A girl who had grown up invisible had just been found by the only family she had left in the world. Robert looked up at Maya, with fierce determination in his tear-filled eyes. "You are not alone anymore," he said. "Do you understand? You will never be alone again. I know I can never make up for the years you lost. I can never bring your mother back. But I swear to you, on everything I have, I will spend the rest of my life trying to give you the family you deserve." Maya looked at this man, this stranger who shared her blood. She thought about the photograph under her pillow, the message on the back. "Music will always find you home." All those years, she had wondered what those words meant. Now she finally understood. Her mother had known. Somehow she had known that one day the music would lead Maya exactly where she needed to be. Home. The days that followed felt like a dream Maya was afraid to wake up from. The competition ended that night, but nobody remembers who officially won. The newspapers did not write about technical scores or musical talent. They wrote about the orphan girl and the billionaire judge. They wrote about a family torn apart by pride and brought back together by a song. Within hours, the story had spread across the country. Within days, it had spread across the world. Maya's face appeared on television screens and magazine covers. Reporters gathered outside the orphanage, desperate for interviews. The quiet girl who had spent her whole life being invisible was suddenly the most famous child in the nation. But Maya barely noticed any of it. She was too busy trying to understand the strange new reality she had woken up in. Robert came to visit her at the orphanage the very next morning. He arrived in a simple car, not a limousine. He wore a plain sweater, not an expensive suit. He sat with Maya in the small recreation room where she had taught herself to play piano, and he told her stories about her mother. He told her about Slav, how it could fill an entire room. He told her about the songs used to sing while doing chores around the house. He told her about the time had rescued a stray cat and hidden it in her bedroom for 3 weeks before their father found out. Maya listened to every word like she was starving and the stories were food. For the first time in her life, her mother was becoming real. Not just a face in a photograph, but a living, breathing person with habits and quirks and a heart full of love. Robert also told her about the hard things. The fights with their father, the pressure to be perfect, the expectations that had crushed so many dreams in their family. He did not hide his own mistakes. He talked about the cruel words he had said the night left. He talked about the years he spent regretting them, the private investigators he hired, the dead ends that broke his heart over and over again. "I gave up eventually," he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. "I convinced myself she was happier without us, that she had built a new life somewhere and did not want to be found. It was easier to believe that than to face the truth." Maya reached out and took his hand, just as she had done on the stage. It was becoming easier now. This man was no longer a stranger. He was her uncle, her family, the only connection she had left to the mother she never knew. "She would have forgiven you," Maya said softly. "I know she would have." Robert's eyes filled with tears. "How can you be so sure?" Maya thought about the photograph, the message on the back, the music box that had made sure stayed with her daughter even when everything else was lost. "Because she left me a way to find you," Maya said. "She put her heart into that music box. She wrote those words on the photograph. She knew that one day, somehow, the music would bring us together. She would not have done that if she had not already forgiven you." Robert broke down again, but this time the tears felt different. They were not just grief and guilt. They were relief, healing, the beginning of something new. The adoption process took 3 months. There were lawyers and social workers and mountains of paperwork. There were interviews and home visits and court appearances. Robert could have used his money and influence to speed things up, but he wanted to do everything properly. He wanted Maya to know that she was not just being acquired like another business deal. She was being chosen, wanted, loved. The day the adoption became official was the happiest day of Maya's life. She stood in a courtroom with Mrs. on one side and Robert on the other. A judge read some formal words from a document and asked if everyone understood what was happening. Maya nodded, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. When the judge signed the final paper, Robert knelt down and hugged Maya than she had ever been hugged before. "Welcome home," he whispered. Maya buried her face in his shoulder and cried. But for the first time in 12 years, they were not tears of loneliness. They were tears of joy. Her new home was nothing like the orphanage. Robert lived in a beautiful house on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The windows were tall and wide, letting in sunlight that made everything glow. There were gardens filled with flowers and trees that swayed in the sea breeze. There was a room just for Maya, bigger than the entire dormitory she used to share with 11 other girls. But the thing that made Maya gasp when she first saw it was the piano. It sat in a sunlit corner of the living room, a grand piano, polished and gleaming, more beautiful than the one she had played at the competition. Robert had bought it specially for her. He had even had a small golden plaque made and attached to the side. The plaque read, "For Maya, may your music always find you home." Maya ran her fingers over the keys that first day and burst into tears. She was home, she was finally home. The months that followed were filled with new experiences Maya had never imagined. She started at a real school where she made friends her own age. She took piano lessons from a world-famous teacher who said she was the most naturally gifted student he had ever seen. She learned to swim in the ocean, to ride a bicycle, to laugh without covering her mouth. But Robert made sure she never forgot where she came from. Together, they established a foundation in its name. The foundation was dedicated to finding orphaned children with artistic talents and giving them opportunities to develop their gifts. Scholarships, instruments, lessons, mentorship, everything Maya had never had growing up. Maya became the foundation's youngest ambassador. She visited orphanages around the country, playing piano for children who reminded her of herself. She told them her story. She told them that no matter how invisible they felt, someone out there was looking for them. Someone out there would see them one day. "Do not give up," she would say at the end of every visit. "Keep playing, keep singing, keep painting, keep doing whatever makes your heart feel alive, because you never know who might be listening." The children would look at her with wide eyes, and Maya would see hope flickering in their faces. The same hope Mrs. had seen in her. The same hope her mother had written about on the back of a photograph. One year after the competition, Robert gave Maya a gift. It was wrapped in simple brown paper, tied with a white ribbon. Maya opened it carefully, not knowing what to expect. Inside was the music box. But it was not broken anymore. Robert had taken it to the finest craftsman in the country and had it completely restored. The wood was polished. The mechanism was repaired. When Maya lifted the lid, the melody played clearly for the first time in her life. Her mother's heart song filled the room. Maya held the music box against her chest and closed her eyes. She could almost feel her mother's presence beside her. She could almost hear her voice whispering the words that had guided her through the darkest years of her life. "Music will always find you home." That night, Maya sat at her piano as the sun set over the ocean. The sky turned orange and pink and gold. The waves crashed gently against the cliffs below. Robert sat in an armchair nearby, reading a book but mostly just watching her with a smile on his face. Maya began to play. It was a new song this time, not about loneliness or longing, not about letters to someone who could never write back. This song was about gratitude, about family, about the strange and beautiful journey that had brought her from a dusty recreation room to this moment. She called it Coming Home. And as the last notes faded into the evening air, Maya knew that her mother was listening. Somewhere out there, beyond the sunset, was smiling. Her daughter had found her way home, just like she always knew she would.